Well, welcome back to Consumer Trial Lawyer Academy. I'm very glad to have with me a great friend, Elizabeth Larrick. If you don't know Elizabeth, Elizabeth is one of the national leaders on focus groups. She spends pretty much most of her career now is based on doing focus groups, working with lawyers all over the country. She's considered one of the top experts. I personally used her many times. My firm uses her often. She has a tremendous amount of insight in this area. And I thought it would be useful to people who are following my channel and know me and the type of work that I do to have the benefit of hearing from Elizabeth, and not only for what she can help you with through these sessions. We're going to do 3 or 4 videos on different portions of this world, but also obviously to have had some experience and interaction through these videos. Then if you need those types of services, she's also a great resource. So Elizabeth, welcome as always. Always good to see you. Thank you for being with me on the show.
Thank you, Nick, for having me.
When we talked about doing this, you and I both thought it would be a good idea. Just you do your own shows and you have your own company and you have a podcast and YouTube channel and you work in this field pretty much every day, 24/7. This is your world now, right?
Yes. I moved from practicing attorney, having my own, personal injury plaintiff's firm into doing this 100% full time.
And as I mentioned, you've worked with a number of folks that I'm friends with. You work all over the country. You and I have worked together on a number of cases since I moved to Austin, and this is an area of focus for you. You teach with I know Don Keenan's group. Some I've seen you in meetings and stuff there. So you're kind of at the epicenter from the plaintiff's perspective on this type of work nowadays, right?
I would say so. I mean, I feel like plaintiff's work has used focus groups and mock juries for a very long time, but the way that plaintiff's lawyers are using them now is very different and much like there's a lot more flexibility. And so I think that's kind of where, broadening the horizons about using focus groups and mock juries is where we're at right now. And especially with the transition through the pandemic and really, you know, gently forcing lawyers to use more technology and to be able to do more as far as even with those focus groups.
Yeah, and that's true. It's that's the thing I can tell the audience. Working with Elizabeth, she's great at both in person, virtual, and she's very flexible about how she can work with you. So it doesn't matter if you're not in Austin, Texas. She works with people from all over the country on these issues, either in person or remote. If you want to travel, or she's always happy to go where you need her if you need to do in person. Another feature of our life in the plaintiff's practice, right, is just frequent flyer miles are back to being a thing, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, what I've seen is, we had this big transition. And even for me, I mean, at the time when the pandemic hit, I mean, I think in January of 2020, I said, okay, like this is it. I'm going to go all in on focus groups and trial prep and witness prep and strategy. And then the pandemic hit and it was like, oh my gosh, how do you do this? How do you do in-person focus groups when you can't get in person? And we had no idea how long it would be before we could do that. And I mean, I'm so grateful that I had a coach at the time who just basically kind of, again, gently forced me into say, get on that Zoom, figure out that virtual focus group. And it's just taken off from there. It's because of the flexibility that we have. And at the time, we still had a lot of uncertainty, even in 2021, with going back in person for trial. So I really wanted people to get comfortable, be flexible. If you had to try a Zoom trial, you could at least try it out with a virtual.
Oh, absolutely. From my own career, I was an early adopter of technology as a solo many, seems like millions of years ago now. I can remember the first video conference deposition I ever took. The witness was in New York. I had to go to there was a company back home in Alabama where I lived. their entire business was video conferencing, and they had built a facility. It used to be an old bowling alley. They tore the bowling alley down, put up this nice facility, and you go in there and you had to go into these rooms, and you had these special fiber optic connections. It was so much, you know. Then all the little cameras and things you could slide your exhibits under, but it was like it was such a huge investment. You know, there was so much there into that facility for that place to have. I think they had 30 rooms that you could be in person, but then they also were doing the virtual where they were connecting people. And I just remember thinking, man, I am so high tech. You know, this is like 1999, 2000, and that deposition was very clunky and difficult. And it, we would lose connection. We'd have to wait for the connection to come back. So it was really like it was kind of like dial-up internet nowadays, and we think back about that. If you're old enough to remember dial-up, I mean, we probably got some lawyers practicing that don't even remember dial-up. I don't know, but yeah, it's come so far, and it's so much easier now. And as you said, the pandemic, I think, it was critical. I used to suggest video depositions or doing a web service like this a lot of times pre-pandemic, and people would look at you like you lost your damn mind. They're like, what do you mean? Video? What is that? Yeah. You mean the witness will be somewhere else? I mean, I can't lean over the table at them. And I'm like, doesn't really help anyway, but whatever. So yeah, it's come so far, and it is, I think it's something that people should be comfortable with. And I'm like you, I remember very well Zoom, 2020, 2021, we were all forced to get really comfortable with that process. I actually I did an arbitration trial over Zoom that resulted in almost a $2 million verdict in a mortgage servicing case. And literally, I sat in my office, what used to be my kitchen table, I sat there and did that trial over the course of about a week. And it was always, it was always an experience adjusting to that. But the intensity of the work doesn't really go away. It's just you don't get up and walk around the courtroom anymore like you used to. So, so let's talk about the first session we want to talk about was, the focus group and mock trials. Specifically talking about targeting trial prep. You worked with me on the Garcia case that I had against Wells Fargo, and that's probably a good, case to talk about for that type of thing. Let's talk us through, from your perspective as the expert, kind of, what you like to do to help plaintiffs' lawyers get ready when they're, sort of on the eve of trial or trial prep, and they really got to get ready and focus. Take us through that process.
Sure. And just, for folks listening in, tuning in, we're talking about in person, because that's what, at the time when Nick and I did these two in-persons that again, trial's going to be in person, and you were on the doorstep of trial. So we generally try to say, hey, in person is the best, because at that point in time, thinking about trial prep and when in the case are we talking about? Well, typically people are going to run that mock trial, right? Where it's one of the most involved processes you could ever do, because you got to have a lot of people helping you to play all the different roles. Even if you don't have witnesses come live, you still have a lot of video edits to be able to present witnesses that way. But that's a huge, big endeavor, doing those mock trials. And most people, even, the big companies, the big litigations, they don't do those until the 30-day mark, right? But what we're talking about is plaintiffs' lawyers, folks in, solos or even mid-size, is doing kind of a mock a focus group, where basically we're doing kind of an abbreviated trial, meaning, and the way that I like to do them is we have basically opening versus opening. And that can be it, right? So we're talking maybe at the 60-day mark, 60 days before trial, because what you want to be able to do is at that 60-day mark, having that focus group at that point really forces you to write your opening statement. A lot of lawyers will wait to do this. And that's one of the biggest places where it's like, hey, this is the one thing you can nail down now. I know that once you get into trial, bullets are flying and things are changing and you're shucking and jiving, but that opening statement can really be solidified early on. And so that's why I always encourage people at that 60-day mark, even if you want to do the 70-day mark, or 75 days, that really then gives you the opportunity to come back and refashion it and do it again. The other reason why I really like the opening versus opening is you can really sit down and say, okay, we'll always have a planning session, like, okay, well, what's the biggest thing that is, terrifying you, or the biggest hurdle? And some people say, hey, it's disputed liability, right? Or, hey, it's it's the pre-existing thing, or hey, it's, this, they're not going to care about my clients, right? Like, this is just something that, so we say, okay, let's fashion this opening statement just around that. Such, don't give me an hour long opening statement. That puts everybody to sleep. So we're doing really kind of short ones, and they vote in between, and then we do a discussion. If there's more time, then we can always add in witness clips as well, like really short, 5-7 minutes, just to introduce them to the players of the entire case and get feedback. But that really allows you the dynamic then of being able to come back and do another panel, because we're talking about really, you could get that done in 3 hours, right? And the other thing about being in person is, like, you're on your feet, you're in it, you are practicing, you're doing that presentation style, just to get in the mode. Because I know people, when they wait, right, you wait, and it's like you don't ever hit that mode. And I think you really want to be getting in the trial mode before the 30-day mark, because then
That's right.
there's this, Nick, you can probably describe it. There's a total different mode you move into, and it's like, we're doing this, versus like, well, maybe
Right.
it's intended.
Right. Yeah.
No,
And
no, no.
that's, yeah. And that's something that one of the lessons we talked about on my channel, I've already done a lesson on it, is that mindset of, when do you start getting ready for that pretrial? And this is a good tie-in if you do think that you want to make that a part of your case. And I'll, from my practical perspective as, the guy that's trying cases, I can tell the audience that what you are able to do for us is help us sort of take off the blinders, look for the weaknesses, see what the level of exploitation is. Elizabeth does a great job of hammering in on the things that you may be scared of about your case, and help you find the things that the other side might exploit, and give you an idea of how people react to it if it's exploited well. And then also, that gives you great insight into how do I want to address this and frame this as the plaintiff in the case, so that I'm either disarming this issue well before the defense uh, attempts to make it a problem, or I have great insight into how I need to address it in sort of my case in chief. And so that's where Elizabeth's efforts can be very valuable to you, just to give you just a brutally clear picture of both strengths and weaknesses. So you're not blindsided by something, because for a plaintiff's lawyer who's spent a lot of time getting ready, that's the worst feeling in the world, to be sitting in the middle of the courtroom and you just get punched in the jaw with something that you just, for whatever reason, you didn't see coming. So that third party perspective and getting ready for trial prep with using someone with Elizabeth's skill set is really great for the cases that you're expecting to go to trial, for sure.